Taser devices are often seen on TV and reported in the media. But what is Taser? Who can use it? And why is it needed?
Listen, watch, react, good.
Tasers are actually referred to as conductive energy devices. They are a less lethal weapon that the police in the UK use as one of a number of options when force needs to be used. Here we have the Taser X26. This is the device that is authorised for use in the UK. This is the X2, the new generation of Taser conductive energy devices, or CEDs. This has got 2 cartridges. So again, that's good for officers if the first connection does not connect properly. You obviously have a backup there that's going to assist you. And it's a clever device because it can actually detect whether there is a good connection, and it can actually reduce the amount of electricity that flows to that person. It works on 2 levels, a physiological and a psychological level. Psychologically, the mere presence of this is enough to actually prevent situations from escalating, and in the majority of situations that this turns up to with the officers, the situation is brought to a very swift conclusion without the need for this to be fired. When we do activate the trigger and fire the device, we have a cartridge on the end. Within the cartridge there are 2 barbed probes. Those 2 barbed probes will leave the end of the cartridge and propel themselves towards the intended target. The barbed probes will attach themselves to the person. They don't have to be in the person's skin. They can actually attach themselves to the clothing. And once they've attached themselves, the electricity then flows down the wires to the person, hopefully achieving something called neuromuscular incapacitation, or NMI.
When the barbs of a conducted energy device land within a short distance of each other, up to about 9 inches, it does not involve enough muscle to incapacitate the individual, but rather causes intense, overwhelming pain between those 2 barbs and will often terminate conflict. When those barbs land at a greater distance from one another on the body, usually more than 9 to 10 inches, it tends to incapacitate the entire individual. The individual will be unable to operate muscles and will often go fairly rigid. There will still be a huge amount of pain, but that individual will no longer be able to make any voluntary movements or offer aggression or resistance, and they tend to fall to the ground.
I think it's really important to explain what we mean by using a taser. There are 7 uses that we record in the UK. Drawing it, aiming it. The next one is red dot, and that is putting the red dot laser sighting system onto the intended target and drawing their attention to it. We then have arcing it. The next one is firing. The next one is drive stun, which is cartridge off, arcing it and applying it to the person. We show officers how it works, but we don't actually teach it as part of the course. The main reason is that it is quite ineffective when we actually do that. And the final one is angle drive stun. The 2 probes come out of the end of the device, and perhaps one of them does not connect with the person. We would then follow up by touching the taser on the person and creating a circuit.
Officers go through a considerable amount of training in order to understand their use of force. They also go through a considerable amount of training in order to use the Taser conducted energy device. The 3-day initial user course that we train here is primarily aimed at 24/7 response officers. The first day is really classroom based, and the officers learn the theory behind the powers, procedures, the operational and tactical requirements of using Taser. That knowledge is underpinned by a knowledge check at the end of the day, which is pass or fail. The second day is more practically based. Officers use Taser in a number of scenarios. During the second day, they are subject to a qualification shoot where we assess their competency with the Taser, their safe handling and their probe placement. The third day involves more tactics using Taser, and the officers receive other inputs on vulnerable persons and post-incident procedures. Finally, the officers take part in an assessed scenario against a number of competencies of which they can pass or fail.
Police officers get called to many incidents. Thankfully, the vast majority of occasions a police officer is called to deal with something, it usually ends in a very innocent and very normal situation. However, there are times when officers will get to a situation that's either violent or there is a threat of violence, or even a situation that is pretty innocuous that then turns into a violent incident. What we need to understand is that officers who do go out and use force use it in the knowledge that it is almost a last resort. It's something that they do not go out in order to use for every situation. They have to justify within the law exactly why they're using force and when they're actually going to use it.
When encountering a threatening situation, police officers have a number of use of force options, and depending on the level of threat that the police officer perceives, he or she may select a number of options that start from talking to people, being assertive with people, laying hands on people, applying blows and strikes with empty hands.
Get back! Stay back!
Weapons can be deployed. Police officers may choose to deploy a baton.
Get back! Stay back!
They may choose to deploy incapacitant spray or a police dog. Or in extreme circumstances, a firearm. And in recent years, police officers have had the availability of conducted energy devices. For each of these use of force options, there is a risk to the police officer, the subject, and in certain circumstances, to third parties at the scene. The challenge is for the police officer to be able to terminate that struggle as quickly and as safely as possible, minimising the risk of injury to him or herself, the subject or third parties, but also to use a use of force option that's likely to be effective on first deployment and prevent the escalation to higher levels of use of force options.
Conducted energy devices provide tactical advantages in situations where the subject is threatening violence or using violence. They provide control at a safe distance whilst minimising the risk to the subject, the police officers, or members of the public.
Police get called to incidents by all sorts of different people for all sorts of different reasons. Officers who go to these incidents are backed up with legal powers in order to be able to deal with use of force issues. So we have common law, section 117 of the Police and Criminal Evidence Act and section 3 of the Criminal Law Act, amongst others.
If an officer decides to use force, then he or she will consider a number of tactical options. They will do this in line with something called the National Decision Model. Officers will use this decision-making tool before, during and after the incident. These thought processes can occur within seconds, or they may take minutes for the National Decision Model to revolve. At the heart of the National Decision Model is the Code of Ethics. The Code of Ethics governs police officers on their standards of professional behaviour and the policing principles. Police officers also have to abide by the Pelion principles to protect life and to bring offenders to justice.
When an officer uses force, a number of things have to happen afterwards. First of all, they have to justify that use of force. They have to justify that use of force before they make it, during the time that they make it, and then afterwards they have to record the fact that they have actually used force itself. Most importantly, an officer needs to assess that person, that individual that they've used force upon, to see if they need any medical attention. It can come in the form of an officer asking that person if they're okay, applying first aid, calling for an ambulance, calling for enhanced medical facilities to come to that scene to help that person. And it doesn't matter what force that is used, officers have to make sure that that person is given the best care in order for them to recover from what it is that they've just been through.
With any use of force, including conducted energy devices, there is always a risk of injury and a risk of death. In the vast majority of subjects, it is likely that they will be fully compliant and able to get to their feet after taser deployment. It's a very unpleasant but effective experience in terminating violence.
We're only firing it, we're only activating the trigger and deploying the probes on 20% of occasions. What we actually have there is officers attending an incident where there is violence or threats of violence being displayed towards the officers or other members of the public. So it's an incident where officers could potentially use force, but the mere presence of this, or the red dot, or arcing, is enough to bring that violent or potentially violent situation to a swift conclusion. And that's got to be good, because it's safe for the officers, it's safe for the public, and it's safe for the person who is displaying the violent tendencies.
I think Taser is a positive use of force for police officers. There are other tactical options available, but I can say without doubt that Taser has saved the lives of police officers, members of the public, and the subjects themselves.